Can you explain just the possible effect of replacement theology on the situation in Israel? And then as Christians, for us as Christians watching this, what should we be doing as believers watching this go down?
Okay, when you go through the Bible, good idea to start in the Old Testament and find out what the Bible's about. And the book of Deuteronomy is literally means the second law. It was the law reiterated, given to the people of Israel when they were going into the land of Canaan. And at the end of the book of Deuteronomy, you have chapter 28 through 30. And in chapter 30, this is what God says to these people. It shall come to pass when all these things come upon you, the blessings and the curses which I have set before you. God had said, if you abandon me, I'm going to curse you. And so basically, when you're looking at chapter 28, you have right around 15 verses of blessings, and then 45 to 48 verses, I can't remember what the number is exactly, of cursings. And all the cursings came down on these people. It's just wild. It just goes through their history. And God says, when all these blessings and cursings have come upon you, the blessing and the curse which I have set before you, you call them to mind among all the nations where the Lord your God drives you, and you return to the Lord your God and obey his voice according to all that I command you today, you and your children, with all your heart, with all your soul, that the Lord your God will bring you back from captivity, have compassion on you, gather you again from all the nations where the Lord your God has scattered you. If any of you are driven out to the farthest parts under heaven, from there the Lord your God will gather you, and from there he will bring you. None of that happened until after 70 AD. That's when they were scattered to the farthest parts of the earth. That's when that all took place. And so before that point, these people, when you're talking about the nation of Israel, northern kingdom, they were in basically the Ninevite kingdom, and then afterwards the Babylonians came in and took the Jews to Babylon. That's all in the Middle East, and the Israelites who were faithful to the Lord had already defected from the northern kingdom of Israel and gone down to Judah. And when Judah was sent to Babylon, many of the Jews came back to Israel, and that's how you have the restart of Israel 70 years after the Babylonian captivity. It wasn't until after the Roman destruction of Jerusalem and the Bar Kokhba wars in 132 AD that the Jews were dispersed all over the world. And that's what God's talking about. So he says, God flat out says he's bringing the Jews back from all over the world, back to the land of Israel. And that's something that we've seen the precursor of with the revival of the Jewish nation, and is going to be finally and completely fulfilled when Jesus comes back at the second coming. Okay, here's another passage. This is a promise that God made to Abraham. This is in Genesis 17, 7 through 8. It says, I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you in their generations for an everlasting covenant to be God to you and your descendants after you. Also, I give to you and your descendants after you the land in which you are a stranger, all the land of Canaan, as an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. So the land of Canaan is Israel's forever, and it's not something that God said was going to end. He did talk about the fact that they were going to be out of the land and that they were going to be brought back, but it's still Israel's land. And so if it's an everlasting possession, that means that Israel needs to still exist if the land is still there. And so here we are. Israel still exists. And the idea that Israel is not something that God is concerned with, especially when you're talking about in the last days, is just so foreign to the Old Testament and the New Testament that it's just ridiculous. You cannot get that teaching out of the Bible. You have to get that out of an extra biblical book. And that is what replacement theology is all about. And the idea, it actually came from Augustinian theology, and finally it became Roman Catholic theology that the church replaces Israel because the Jews crucified Christ and they're Christ killers. And so that became the doctrine of the church. And when the Reformation took place, some of the Reformation denominations kept that doctrine, basically, and kept that type of theology. As you know, when you return to biblical theology, that just doesn't stand up. It doesn't stand up. God made promises to Israel. Those promises have not been fulfilled in total. Many of them have, but the majority have not. And God keeps his promises, and he's keeping his promises to those people. The idea that Israel isn't a player in the last days is, again, foreign to the Old Testament. It's foreign to the New Testament. A straightforward reading of the book of Revelation has Jews in the land of Israel in the last days with a temple and, and all the tribes, and so, this idea that God is done with the Jews and he's not going to work with them anymore is just ridiculous. In fact, the whole purpose of the tribulation period, which is what the book of Revelation chronicles, is to bring Israel back into a relationship with God. And that's exactly what he's going to do. That's what he's in the process of doing. And that's what's going to take place. God still loves the nation of Israel. And he keeps his promises. The gifts and callings of God are without repentance, Paul said in Romans chapter 11, and he was talking about the nation of Israel. And so God has called them as his chosen people. They're in rebellion against him now, but he's going to bring them back under a covenant relationship with him, the one that he made in the Old Testament. It was an unconditional covenant. God made a covenant with Abraham. Abraham was not involved except for sitting there watching. And God made the promises without Abraham's participation on any level. And that's why the covenant can continue with his descendants after the fact.